What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JAR. JAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. It's our weekly show where we go over the Magic stories as they're posted on Wizards' website, or as we've been doing recently, some Vorthos adjacent content as we wait for the Magic stories to return with Rivals of Ixalan in 2018. And this week we're going to continue our three-part series covering the Unstable Scraps articles written by Mark Rosewater. He released them in 3 parts. We're covering them in 3 parts over 3 weeks. And then it's going to finish off, we're going to finish off the year with our top X list of the Magic stories of 2017. We give you our opinions on that. So stay tuned for that. And like I said, this week though, we're at Unstable Scraps Part 2. If you missed Part 1, it'll be linked at the end for you, or it might be on the sidebar there somewhere, or whatever. But our quick review at the beginning, as we usually do, I said last time that if you're interested in Unstable, if you're interested in the cards, in playing the set, etc., I recommend you read these articles. I think that the stories behind them are kind of interesting, even if you're not necessarily interested in game design or things like that, where you kind of get to hear behind the scenes of how cards get made and the discussions that are had between the people. You still get an idea of where these cards came from, where the mechanics came from, and what they were inspired by. And so for that, I think it's really interesting and it's worth your time, and it's not very time consuming. So it doesn't ask a lot of you time-wise. I think last week because that was my same advice as last week. I think your advice last week was that no matter who you are to read it. Is that still kind of where you fall?
They're getting pretty specific in terms of the specificity of the cards.
Nice.
And so maybe it makes a little bit more sense to not read all of these unless you actually care about Unstable or you care a lot about the sort of processes that were used in creating them by the creative team or whoever else at Wizards, because a lot of these sort of tidbits about these cards kind of involve more people than you think they will.
Right, well, and especially because this set was kind of in design for such a long period of time, it just was from thrown out ideas from black border sets going back very, very far into the past. It's kind of that idea of where that idea might have come from, and like Amy said, who might have influenced it along the way, positively or negatively.
Right.
So no, that's fair. We can kind of talk about this at the end, but we'll talk about Unstable at the end as a set as well. But to get into the article itself and to get into some of the cards that were talked about, as we did last week, just as a comment, if you read the article, we're not going to cover every card that he talked about, just the ones that we feel like we have some input in or we can have some say into. And so the first one, that being said, that we want to talk about is Entirely Normal Armchair. This was a card that was a preview card for one of our fellow Magic content creators, as well as many other things as well, in Loading Ready Run. It was something that I believe they got to reveal during their Desert Bus for Hope charity live stream, which, if you ever get the chance, is a hoot and I enjoy watching it, so I recommend it, I guess, if you care about my recommendations and opinions on things. But
well, I mean, this is a review show. So.
Well, there you go. It's my quick review is watch it. If you can find clips of it and things like that, it's totally worth it. And of course, if you can find it in your heart and or wallet to donate, that is obviously also a big plus. But in terms of Entirely Normal Armchair, to get more specific with it, a lot of people say it is the new Cheaty Face. It's the Cheaty Face variant in the set. It is, but it's different. And I like the changes that Mark and his team made to it, because the Cheaty Face variant here is that it's not a creature. And so with Cheaty Face, if you snuck it onto the battlefield, you could then just start attacking with it constantly, which was kind of annoying because it was always there, and if you missed it once, you just kind of had to always deal with the fact that it was there attacking you and stuff. But with Entirely Normal Armchair, you use it and then it's used up. So if you have more than one, that's a different story, but Entirely Normal Armchair can activate to get rid of an attacking creature, which is a much better use of a literal trap. Right? The entirely normal armchair is basically a bear trap on a chair. And so the attacking creature gets near the chair and sits on it by attacking it, and the bear trap closes and destroys that creature. But now the trap has been sprung, and so the card is gone. That makes a lot more sense to me. I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Flavorfully and mechanically, I think it makes sense.
Cute.
What are your, I don't know if you had any thoughts on entirely normal armchair.
Well, I really love the art on that card. I like how flavorful just everything about it is.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those people who only reads mechanics specifically for the purpose of seeing how the flavor coincides with it. And so in this case, I'm really happy with this card.
Yeah, I think what's cool about entirely normal armchair is even if somebody doesn't understand what unstable is as a joke set and or just an outside the norm set, or maybe doesn't even understand Magic the Gathering in general, if you tell them this card is called entirely normal armchair, probably anybody's first question is going to be, but what's wrong with it? Because it's just obvious, right? It's named entirely normal armchair. It makes perfect sense. The art, as Amy pointed out, it has
It's hilarious.
Yes, and it has the bear trap. Like, you can see that it's a bear trap in the art. But I can imagine someone just walking by it and being like, "Oh, that's a weird design," and then moving on. If it were a real life chair, being like, "I wonder why that's like that. That's weird." But then if they ever sat on it, they'd have a real bad time. So again, just in terms of the set may be a joke set, or again, just an outside the norm set, but it doesn't mean
It's a totally normal set.
I don't think so. But I like the fact that they
It's
are
just a giant bear trap.
Yes, I like the fact that they are able to still go so in depth with it, right? And it shows in the player base. Like I said, we'll talk about that later. The next thing I want to talk about was not a specific card, but was more the ability of Last Strike. I think it's funny. I think it's interesting. I think a lot of people made comments that, oh, it really limits you to now you can't do that again. You know, in other words, you've now defined first, double, and last. And it's like, yes, that makes sense because, first of all, how many different combat damage phases are you going to be going through? But second of all, I don't think you need to be going with, second to last strike or second strike after first strike or whatever, because yes, then at that point you haven't limited yourself because you can go with second strike, second to last strike, etc. But
Second and a half strike.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it becomes a little much.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that you can have triple strike, right? There's the three-headed goblin that has triple strike because it has first strike, it deals regular combat damage, and then it has last strike as well. But I also like the fact that if somehow there is a card, because the card that has last strike on it is not entirely, we just talked about that. Extremely, there's a lot of qualifying words. Extremely slow zombie. An extremely slow zombie is the one with last strike, with the 4 different arts, because now we know about the art variants on cards, and there's the 4 different arts, and it shows the zombie in each season of the year, because there's 4 different arts. And in each season, he is one step closer, or she, I guess, is one step closer than they were in the previous season, implying that
could not be slower.
That's how slow that zombie is. But it's cool that, like, if you take 4 of them and flip them like a flip book, it actually works because the zombie is getting closer to the viewer each time, which I like. I think that's really cool. But I also like the fact, mechanically, I like the fact that if you give the extremely slow zombie, we really shouldn't have done entirely normal armchair first. It messed me up so much. But if you give the extremely slow zombie double strike, it inherently now has triple strike. Because it will deal first strike and normal combat damage because it has double strike, but also last strike, so it effectively has triple strike even though that's not flavorfully what the card does.
Right.
If you can find a way to give it double strike, it works that way, and I think that's mechanically that's really cool.
That's cool.
I like it. I think that's cool. So
yeah, it's definitely not flavorfully.
no, the
nice,
extremely slow zombie has first strike and last strike. It's weird.
First strike, regular strike, and last strike.
Yes, and then there's the triple-headed or the three-headed, not triple-headed, but the three-headed goblin, which the flavor text says something like, 2 heads are better than 1, but after that, as you keep increasing, you get kind of diminishing returns, which makes sense because they're goblins, so they're not supposed to be that smart. I think one of the 3 heads is eating the ear of one of the other heads, so it's just again.
Fun.
Yes, exactly. And that's really all that these cards are supposed to be, but they're also creative.
Yeah.
Right? I think it would have been fine if it was just fun, but it's also very creative and people still got to flex their creative muscles here, which is really impressive. Then
I mean, all the sets are creative, but a set like this is creative and I feel like more fun for the creative team to create.
yes. Yeah, and I mean, it's not as rewarding, I think, maybe. I guess it depends on who they are, but I don't know that it's necessarily as rewarding as creating a full world from the ground up, right? In a world building type of a scenario, because what you have created then is this whole world and its mythos and the characters and etc. Here you have that because we talked about the story from here a few weeks ago from Unstable.
I feel like they still got to do that.
That's true. Maybe I'm not being fair.
And the world that they've created is maybe a bit less complex.
Oh yeah.
But it's more fun.
Yeah.
So I think in the ways that it's lacking, it's kind of compensating for itself by being something that they can, I don't know, just kind of go outside of the box to think about, more than they get to normally.
Right. So the next card that I very much enjoy, I feel like there are very few of these, especially if I chose to talk about them on the show. I feel like there are very few of these where I'm like, and then there's this card which kind of sucks. Like most of these I'm just going to be like, I love this card, and I feel like I'm just going to be repetitive. But the next card we're going to be...
That's a good thing.
I guess. The next card we're going to be talking about is Go to Jail. Which, when I first saw it, I was like, that's very akin to Monopoly.
Right.
Well, guess what?
Hasbro.
It's exactly akin to Monopoly because, yes, Monopoly is owned by Hasbro. Coincidentally, you know what else is owned by Hasbro? Wizards of the Coast, who makes Magic the Gathering. And, spoilers for next week, Sword of Dungeons and Dragons. So, we'll talk about that, like I said, in next week's jar video. But... this week we have Go to Jail, which references the Monopoly mechanic of going to jail. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, all that fun stuff. I like that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, me too.
Speaking of things that we think is really cool, because again, otherwise why would we be talking about it? The Grand Calcutron.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned, if you were here and you watched the show 2 weeks ago, we talked about the story of Unstable. And we talked about the Grand Calcutron and the story behind the Grand Calcutron, which was that he was just a dude who liked going on vacations. And when he was going on vacation, he wasn't getting his toast fix. And so he replaced his hand with a toaster. And then he realized that, what was it, a cooler in his leg or a heater in his leg or something? I think it was a cooler.
It was a refrigerator.
Yeah. To keep his butter. That was exactly what it was. He was keeping his butter cold in his refrigerator leg that he replaced his leg with, and then he just kept adding on and adding on and adding on until he became more machine than man.
Which, I don't really understand how a machine enjoys toast.
Well, he apparently still does, because according to the story, he still enjoys his toast from now and again.
So I guess he can't be that machiney.
And I will say, I mean, he has to be, though, because we'll talk about that in a second, because that's why we're talking about it today. But you've got the idea of, first of all, I looked at the Grand Calcutron art pretty closely, and I cannot see the toaster, even though it says that it is still there.
Yeah, I didn't find it.
But there is a card in the set, whether it's a common or an uncommon, where it is a flyer whose name I am now not going to remember, I apologize, but that flying creature is from the Grand Calcutron's clan of the cog workers or whatever it's called. And it has a toaster for a hand, this flyer. Oh. So it is, and it references that in its name as well. So there's at least that callback to that flavor there, because the Grand Calcutron basically modified himself so much that he became, like I said, more machine than man, or mostly machine. And in the art, it's really just a giant machine with a dude's head, like really tiny in the background. And what Mark Rosewater said, which I think is really interesting, is that they wanted this Grand Calcutron to be able to be a commander, because they wanted all of the leaders of these different tribes or clans or whatever you want to call them from Unstable to be able to be commanders, since they made silver bordered cards legal in Commander for a short period of time.
Yeah.
But what Mark was saying was that they never really were able to work it out with Grand Calcutron's ability that would also warrant it being a creature in some way. And he said flavorfully it really wouldn't make sense, which I like that. I like that there's a consideration there.
Right.
That they're thinking about it and saying, wait, does that make sense? Does it not? He modified himself so much. Is he really a creature anymore? And can we bend on that? And I think that it's one of the big examples I can think of where they said they kind of sacrificed card quality for story. And even then, it's not really card quality. I mean, like, you know, it just means that there is a gap.
Right.
Because that one clan out of the 5 does not have a commander for that clan, but it's not the end of the world.
But it's really cool, like you said, that they make that consideration, because, you know, if they're going to work that hard on making the flavor that in-depth and interesting, they shouldn't then just end up throwing it out for the sake of, well, commander then, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, but, you know, does it make sense? Is it mechanically and flavorfully correct?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's no offense to Commander players. Again, that's
right,
not what we do. But at the same time, I would hope that if you're watching the show and you enjoy Commander, that you would understand why they weren't able to do that. So,
and if you hate it that much, I guess complain. It probably won't get you anywhere, but try it.
I guess whatever. You're entitled, and as always, you're entitled to your opinions, and we want to hear them in the comments down below.
Yes,
we always say that, and it's true.
So you can complain to Wizards; they probably won't do anything, but you can leave your comments in.
We're somewhat.
Video.
I was going to say we're somewhat of a captive audience. You can complain to us.
Right, exactly.
Speaking of creativity,
we'll
though,
listen.
I don't know what your favorite card in this set is, but I think this one comes close. We have Hangman next.
I knew it was coming.
Did you?
Yes.
So
like, when's Hangman?
Hangman is so cool. It's a 1-mana 1/1, and you secretly note a 6 to 8 letter word, I believe it is. I know it's max of 8.
It's 6 to 8.
6 to 8. So it's a 6 to 8 letter word. See, Amy knows the cards better than I do. What is happening? Where are we?
Hell is freezing over.
It's topsy-turvy world. Yeah, so it's 6 to 8 letter word that you note down, and then your opponent can guess that word at any time, or guess a letter in that word. And if they do it incorrectly, a +1/+1 counter gets put on Hangman, and then if they guess the whole word, Hangman dies and goes to the graveyard, or you have to sacrifice him. And that's so cool. It's so cool, because one thing that I think Unstable does really well, and I talked about it last week with the countdown is at 1 and things like that, is that it does a good job of, and Buzzing Wackadoodle, I was trying to think of the name, it does a really good job of making you play a game while you're playing this game. I love that. I think that's so creative, right? Talking about the creativity of, this is Magic the Gathering, and they have all these mechanics, and they have mana and flying and attacking and all these basic things. Yes. And yet you can then take this game and just turn it on its head and make
Right.
the players think so far outside of the box of what they understand by making them play other games while they're playing this game.
Right.
You play a game of Hangman and it affects your 1/1 creature for 1 black mana. That's so cool to me.
Right. You were talking about how creative that is, but I think the other side of it that maybe people aren't necessarily noticing as much is how involved that really is. When you're trying to figure out a way to take a completely unrelated game and place it inside your existing game and have it actually functionally work.
Yeah.
That's very involved from more of a mechanic standpoint.
Right.
Than people might realize. They might just think it's super creative. Yeah, but there's a lot of work and functionality that has to go into that to make it work.
Right. Well, you know what I also find interesting? I mean, we talked a little bit about this last week. There are cards, and none of them we're going to talk about this week, but I still want to point it out. There are also cards in the set that make you call on a person outside of the game. And Mark said, both in his articles of Unstable Scraps, but also in his FAQ, ASA, whatever long string of letters that he used to simulate his FAQ, or to title his FAQ, he talked about the fact that when it says a person outside of the game, that literally means any person on the planet Earth that is not currently involved in your game. So that means you and
your game.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, it could be somebody in another
if you're
game or
drafting
something.
at a store, you could interrupt somebody else's game to do that?
Yes. Well, and especially for Unstable. I mean, usually there's like slow play warnings and things like that. For Unstable, it probably would make more sense. But you would also probably, depending on when you play the cards, you might have someone who is already done with their match, or maybe they had a bye or something like that. And so there would just be people around. But I think more interestingly, because we like to talk at least a little bit, where we don't color ourselves as experts by any means, but we like to talk about the business of Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering as well, on occasion, because it is interesting. And I think that, yeah, nice. You're the business person
here.
It's so interesting. But I like the fact that you can call on anyone. And what Mark has said many times, which is true, and I think he should play it up a little bit more even, is that they don't have to know how to play Magic. For a squirrel dealer, you just look at a complete stranger and go, "Excuse me, do you like squirrels?" And if they say yes, you get a squirrel token. And depending on their answer, you and your opponent are going to react in a specific way. And that may key in that person's interest of like, wait, why did you ask me that question? Why did that answer make you two react in that way? Did I do something wrong? And they're going to come over and they're going to look at what's going on. Now, obviously, if you do something like make them your partner or use Kindslaver to have them take control of your opponent's turn, then they're a lot more involved and they have to have a little bit explained to them.
Basic knowledge of Magic
not for a teammate, no, because you can basically give them things and tell them what to do.
Okay.
But for Kindslaver, yes, they have to have a basic understanding because they're now going to play a turn and you're not allowed to influence them in any way.
Yeah.
So there's that. But it's a good marketing tactic because for Unstable, it's an inherently fun set, like we were talking about. So a complete stranger who doesn't understand the game, walking up to a game of Unstable when they've been called over as a complete stranger, hopefully they're seeing the amount of fun that is going on at the table in front of them, and maybe that interests them. Or maybe they go to a friend who they might know who has played or does play, and they'll tell that story.
Right.
And that friend will be interested.
Oh my God, this guy came up to me. I was just looking at something else.
Yep.
This guy came up to me and he asked me about squirrels, and I was like, "What?"
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that you want to happen. You want your game or a situation from your game to be a story that someone tells, because it'll pique someone's interest.
It's a way of the game itself doing its own marketing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and to a degree, having your player base do it for you, because if they want to have a lot of fun, just ask a random stranger this type of a question.
Well, and that's the thing.
Because they'll have no idea what's going on.
And people and studies will tell you word of mouth is usually the best type of marketing.
Correct. And as opposed
the most
to
effective.
all of the advertising money that I'm sure they're spending because they're a corporation and that's how it works.
Yeah.
But yes, and especially not just word of mouth, but word of mouth that is combined with I can't think of the right word right now, but like a positive endorsement. That's the word I'm looking for. An actual endorsement of it. Not just like, oh, there was this weird game these kids were playing and they had squirrels, right? That's technically word of mouth because if they ask, you might be able to tell them the name of it. But if you're like, oh my God, they looked like they were having so much fun and it was hilarious, right? That's an endorsement because you're endorsing the good fun that everyone was having.
Right.
So that's a little bit of an aside.
This is a great sort of set to do that with.
Oh
of
yeah.
course.
Oh yeah.
Because like we said, there's a lot of fun involved, and there are cards that are good for drawing people in, and like you said, taking somebody who doesn't understand what makes this game normal, and just kind of introducing them to the game.
Oh yeah.
And this is, a really fun set to start with.
Yeah.
And then they can kind of, from this maybe, if they decide to start playing Magic,
right,
then they can kind of learn the basic mechanics from this a little bit, as long as there are things that are normal enough.
There are basic enough. I mean, tapping mana, playing spells,
right.
like things like that.
They can use a set like this that's more fun based to kind of learn how to play the game.
Right.
And then when whatever set is next comes out, they might be interested in playing that one as well.
Right. And look, everybody will be interested in a different way, so they might look at the cards and be like, wow, that art looks really funny. And then you could show them a funny piece of art in a black bordered card as well, and have that be their bridging point, right? Show them Feldegriff, the flying hippo. That's a black bordered card. That's a thing, right? I think it's pink or purple. Like it's like a bright and fancy color. Show them Doorkeeper. Show them the bubbling Beebles, or like some of the original Beebles that are actually in black border and stuff like that. And if that's something that they're interested in, that may pique their curiosity as well. So back to we went off on a huge tangent from Hangman. But that's why Hangman is so flavorful and so creative that that's what kind of spurred us into wanting to talk about it, because it kind of leads you to so many other avenues of discussion.
And it's good because it starts with a game that you already know.
Yes.
So if you're somebody who doesn't know Magic and Hangman is at the table that you're now approaching, that's something you can recognize.
Yeah, they're playing Hangman.
Right.
Right? Like, that's something that I think is universally understood. Right. Hopefully. I could be wrong. Maybe there are random people who don't know what Hangman is. But,
cultures.
Right, but it's a lot more universally understood than Magic the Gathering is.
Right, of course.
That I can almost guarantee.
Right.
And so, yes, that would be something that would be a drawing point as well of like, you guys are playing a card game. What does that have to do with Hangman?
Right.
And stuff like that. So, moving on next to Infinity Elemental. Not a lot that I want to say about it, but it is an Infinity 5 creature. That's hysterical to me. I mean, having, I think one of the questions that was asked was like, what if an Infinity Elemental blocks an Infinity Elemental? Because they both have 5 toughness, so yeah, it's infinite power. But I like the idea that the joke of this card isn't just that it has infinite power, but it's that it is the first and probably only vanilla mythic. Right? It's a vanilla creature, it has no abilities, it has no nothing, but it is a mythic at the same time, which is hilarious. Then we move on to Hot Fix. So we were talking about with Hangman, we were talking about a game within the game, and Hot Fix is not necessarily a full game as Hangman or the countdown is at 1 would be, but this is more of like a physical challenge almost. You play the card, you have 10 seconds to manipulate your library in any way you want. You get to look at the cards and set up your next few draws for your next few turns, right? I mean, obviously, ideally, you set up your entire library so that you know what's happening from now until the end of the deck. But it's not really physically possible,
Right.
depending, I mean, if you have like 5 cards left in your library, sure, congrats.
Right,
But otherwise, you have to worry about the fact that you have 10 seconds. And at the end of that 10 seconds, if you are still touching any of the cards in your library, you have to shuffle your library and you've lost that opportunity. I love that. I love that. It's so cool.
I'd be so stressed. I hate being rushed. I hate it.
So Hot Fix is not the card for you. Got it. Amy will be passing me Hot Fixes in unstable drafts. Yeah, so...
I would, oh my gosh. Well, because if I had to shuffle it then, I would be so furious.
So that's Hot Fix. I think it's so cool. I think, again, it's just another layer of, a game within the game. And last but not least of the cards that we want to talk about this time, and then we'll get to the set itself like I promised, the card is Just Desserts. So hilarious. Come on. It's a goblin dressed as a clown throwing a pie at the reader or the viewer.
Right.
And the card deals pie damage. 3.14159, etc., etc., etc. damage to that creature. Now, does the 0.14159 matter? No. Almost never. Right? The only, I think, at the pre-release they were talking about, which wasn't really a pre-release, regardless, they were talking about it doesn't matter as long as there's no other fractional damage or fractional power and toughness, except for the fact that in previous unsets, they have had creatures with halves power and toughness, whether it be literally 1/2 or whether it be like 2.5 or something like that. Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, well, I think that was from Unhinged, I believe. So I have a few of them. The one I'm thinking of offhand is Little Girl, which costs half a white mana to play, and she's a 1/2 creature. And it's just a little girl standing there holding a teddy bear. So,
Okay.
I could be wrong on that. I'm relatively certain that's what it does. I haven't seen that card in a while. But yeah, so that's like the idea of funny things that you can do, right? It deals pie damage. Again, the 0.14159 shouldn't matter, and at least to date it really doesn't. Depending on what they print in the future, it may come into play somehow in other silver bordered sets. They may do something similar, but who knows? But like I said, the thing I wanted to talk about at the end here, unless you had something else to say about Just Desserts. Okay, didn't want to cut you off. So, Unstable is a set that I've heard a lot of different things about from different kinds of people. And that's in person as well as online. And what I would say is, a lot of the things that I've heard are very positive. I would encourage you, if you didn't get the opportunity, and again, I mentioned Loading Ready Run again, we're not sponsored by them, we're not, we weren't asked to do this. I enjoy the things that they make for Magic. I think they are good advocates for the game and put out entertaining content around the game. And so you should go support them because they're doing things to benefit the hobby that you enjoy. And that's my personal opinion. You don't have to agree. But they did the pre-release. Again, I use the quotation marks because it wasn't really the pre-release. It was on release weekend. But they did a draft. It had Mark Rosewater. It had Wedge from the Mana Source. And it had Megan and Maria from Magic the Amateuring, as well as members of Loading Ready Run. And they got to play in a tournament with the Unstable cards. Just watching that video, and even if you haven't gotten a chance to draft the set yet, which you should totally do because it's a lot of fun, that was so enjoyable to watch, right? Whether you enjoyed the crazy spoilers, I guess, feel free to skip a couple of seconds ahead, but whether you enjoyed the two-headed giant Shahrazad sub-game thanks to Spike Tournament Grinder, or whether you thought that was stupid, there are there were many other games. That probably was still not my favorite game that they played, or even match that they played. That would go to Graham and Adam in the first round.
I didn't even watch this, and you were excited about so many things, and you told me about all of these things,
Mm-hmm.
and I was laughing hysterically. I seriously looked at him and said, "I'm sorry, I missed this."
Yeah, and yeah,
I would never say that.
yeah.
about something so long.
I was gonna say
How
it's
long was it?
8 hours, I believe.
Oh my god.
I watched most of it live, and I think I'm still missing the last match. I gotta go back and watch it. But regardless, the point I'm trying to make here is not to just straight shill for Loading Ready Run, but to say that there are still people out there, and everyone is entitled to their opinion, and I'm not trying to tell you not to have this opinion, but I want to at least ask you to consider it separately. But there are people out there who will tell you that Unstable is not worth it to them. And they'll tell that to you because there's not valuable cards in the set. That's not counting the basic lands. The basic lands is a completely different animal, and that's a totally different thing. But I think besides like Urza, Academy Headmaster, and like some of the foils, these cards are not going to be valuable necessarily. In a few years, if the set for whatever reason was not opened heavily, which I doubt is the case because we have heard reports of how much of this is being opened and how much people are enjoying it and how much it's going for online price-wise. And it indicates that a lot of it's being opened, but that's the kind of thing where if for some reason not a lot of it was being opened, that would be what would shoot the price up. I don't think that's going there, but that's not what the set's about.
Right.
Again, the full art lands are a different story, but this is the kind of thing where I've seen people online telling Mark Rosewater, for example, on Twitter, that it is the most fun they have ever had playing Magic the Gathering. I can tell you, I to the degree that I enjoyed watching the pre-release, I don't know that they were exaggerating, and I wouldn't necessarily argue with them, because it seems like that is the case. And Mark at the end, it may have been at the end of part 3, but he says, "Please, please, please go play the set." And I was a little surprised by that, but I guess if he wrote that article prior to seeing people's comments on the set, he may have said that because the first 2 times that an unset was made, he himself has stated that they didn't sell well. They weren't heavily opened. And that is what deterred the company from having a third unset for the amount of time that it took them to get to this point. I can also say that I have now seen reports that are stating that because of the popularity of Unstable to date, it is very likely that we will be getting a 4th, which is great.
Yay!
But show your support and give your opinions. If you don't like it for some reason, tell Wizards that you don't like it. If you do, tell them that you do. Because this, more so than any other set, really, right? We talk about, I'm going to bring it up again. Sorry, loyal viewers. Who am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about Arlen Cord for a second.
Oh boy.
They printed, I'll be brief, I promise, but they printed a Planeswalker card and then didn't give it the time that it needed in the stories. It gave her one lackluster story.
Yes, but I think the reason is because there was so much build-up.
But
if
right.
they hadn't built her up so much, then we wouldn't have been so disappointed with the lack of story associated with
Right.
her.
But my point in bringing her up is to say that she is an example of something where I have talked about her many times. Now, do I think that Wizards has improved their storytelling since then? In my opinion, yes, or at least their character development, right?
Yeah.
Their ability to take a new character that has been newly introduced and give that character the proper amount of time. I think that's true. But I think that in this instance, it's different because unstable may be something that some people at Wizards don't fully support. I don't know this, I have no background knowledge, and nothing that Mark Rosewater said keys me into that belief necessarily.
But they might sort of, like you said, see less value in it.
See less value in it, but also you do have, and I don't want to put every person that fits into this category in a box here, because it is not every person. But there are certain people who are solely interested in Magic for the competitiveness of the game and for the value in the game, the MTG finance aspect.
Well, and there might be people who work at Wizards who don't really want to spend their time working on something silly. They want to work on something that feels like work.
Maybe, but I think the reason I bring it up is because there are those people who I mentioned earlier, and again, it is only some, I am in no way saying it is all, but there are some of those people who are flat out saying, I'm in no way interested in this set. They will ask local game stores to not draft that set because they want to draft Ixalan or Iconic Masters, which is a totally different story of them putting out way too many goddamn sets in the same time period, and that's their fault, not the local game store's faults. But I digress because I'm not getting on that right now because we do not have that kind of time. But those,
I'm thankful.
You're welcome. But those people who do say that, they may not have tried it. Because they're just so much like, well, I won't get any money by opening that set. I don't want to draft it. It's not competitive. I'm not going to get any better.
They sort of automatically dismiss it.
And it's like, you're right. You're not going to get any better at playing Magic. But you're going to enjoy yourself. And you're going to be able to play a game with people who are at your local game store who maybe you see every week. And every time that you see them, maybe they piss you off at F&M because they take too long to make a decision, or they have busted cards, or they draw like a luck sack, right? And you don't. And even though you know, and by the way, I'm not this way, but I know that there are people who think this way, but you know that your deck is better than theirs, but they still can somehow beat you, and you get pissed off about that. This is the opportunity for you to go and have fun. And to be honest, in my opinion, when you play Unstable, I don't care if I lose. If I lose every game of Unstable that I play, I probably will still not give a damn and just want to go back and play it again, because as long as I'm having fun, that is what matters for Unstable as opposed to winning.
Right.
That's my opinion. And as always, genuinely and sincerely, despite the voraciousness with which I just talked about it, if you have a different opinion, I want to know about it, because I want to hear how people can justify it, because I'm curious to hear those different points. That's just the kind of guy I am.
I feel like the things that make Unstable special is going to help the players become more familiar with the other players that frequent the same store that they frequent.
Yes.
And that might make it a little easier to play against them when they are a luck sack, and so, next time.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Yeah. Because instead of you being pissed off about the fact that they're a luck sack, you can call them a luck sack and make fun of them and,
and
be
or
their friend
right.
instead of just be a sore loser.
Right. And
not to say that you are,
but
you know what I mean.
But it also allows you to, if you get to know them a little bit better and you realize that maybe they said a joke that you found really funny, or you said a joke that they found really funny, and you find common ground in some way with that person, it'll allow you to be happy for them if they draw well.
Yeah.
As opposed to being pissed because they beat you, you can be happy because they did well even if you didn't. And you can then, one thing that I say to people a lot if I lose at a tournament, and this is just me, but if I lose to them in a tournament, if it's in the first round or something, I'll say to them, you better go on to win the whole thing because you just beat me. If I think that my deck is better or something like that, that's what I say, right? Because that's a positive thing, right? You're not necessarily happy that you lost, but you say to the person, you know what, fine, you beat me, that means your deck better be better than mine, and you better go on to win the whole thing, so that, it's not like, oh, well, I got beat. Sometimes it does. That's really neither here nor there. Like I said, I do want to hear your opinions down in the comments below, as always.
Yes.
Please feel free to leave them, and
Again, we do read them.
Yes, we do, and if they warrant response, we respond to them as well. So, this has been what was a much longer than we planned episode of Jar, but that's just...
Gee, how unusual. It's a totally normal armchair. It's a totally normal jar.
Oh my god.
It is a totally normal jar.
It is a totally normal jar, despite the fact that it's about Unstable. We will be back next week, as we said, for Unstable Scraps Part 3, the finale of Unstable Scraps. And then, like I said, 2 weeks from now, we will be back. I can't speak anymore. We will be back to talk about our top X list of the stories of the year as we close out 2017, because 2017 is coming to an end. Did you guys know that?
Yeah.
It's coming real quick. So, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. This has been another episode of Jar on Geek for All. Feel free to click that logo up there to subscribe to find out when all these videos come out. We also do drafts every Saturday and paper magic openings every Monday, in addition to these videos every Thursday. But like I said, I've been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And even though it's about Unstable, we were still here showing off our...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
That's right. And hopefully you guys do too. And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.